Kevin and welcome to my channel, Kevin Winsett Music. And this is a IYV IJZ-300 TSB. Well, that's a mouthful, isn't it? So a few years back, I had all my gear stolen from me. And I had a gig to play the following week. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I only had that one guitar, and everything got stolen. So I had the bright idea of trying to get a Affinity Telly at one point in time and upgrading it to see if I could get it ready to go in time for the gig. Well, I ended up not needing it anyway, but it got me the idea of seeing how far I could upgrade certain guitars to see if we could get them playable, sort of gig ready. And then I started building guitars, and I kind of lost track of all that until about a month ago, and I started seeing all these reviews for these IYV guitars. And then I thought, well, you know what, maybe it's time to start seeing what we can do to upgrade these and to get them playable, because I have recommended some of the Affinity Tellys to some of my students and some new players. They're great for that, especially for the price. You cannot beat them for the price. And so I thought, well, if these are half as good as the Fender Tellys, the Affinity Tellys, then they'd be definitely worth upgrading. So this is my first IYV guitar, and I thought, well, you know what, let's do a semi-hollow jazzy type of thing. I picked this up for $177, and this video is about my experience with unboxing it and basically upgrading it, because when it got shipped to me, it was pretty horrible, to be honest with you. It was unplayable. I mean, there's a nick right here. You can see it. I'll show you a little bit more in detail as the unboxing unfolds. But there was no way I could even really play it. It had all 6 strings on it. Now, I'll give you that. But the intonation was out. The nut was cut pretty good. But as soon as I started to upgrade the tuners, the nut fell out. So I upgraded the tuners and the nut, so that I could at least play it to get a baseline of what the pickups sound like, because I'm going to upgrade the pickups too. And all this stuff is the more bargain stuff, you know, like the tuners are the cheaper tuners and the pickups are cheaper pickups. I wanted to try those out to see before I went, you know, too heavy duty on the high dollar stuff, the really good stuff. So that's what this is about. So I couldn't play it out of the box. I had to do the setup on it. And I'll talk about the stats and all that stuff a little bit down the road too. So without further ado, let's get after the unboxing, playability, and upgrades on the cheap. And we'll see you soon. So here we go with the unboxing. This came in a huge box. As a matter of fact, the box was so big, I thought it was double boxed. I thought, since I saw the last reviews were from a couple years ago, that maybe the company was boxing their stuff up a little bit better, but I was wrong. This is exactly how it came. It just was a horrible way to pack a guitar. But it all came in one piece, and nothing was broke too bad. Now, if this was something that was a lot more expensive and I wasn't planning on upgrading, I would definitely send it back. But since this is sort of a project thing, and all I really cared about was basically the wood, then I'm just going to keep it and work with what I got here, so I don't have to deal with all the shipping and everything. Looks pretty good. There was a chip in the paint, you can see there, a big old chip in the poly. But it looks to be real mahogany. The neck looks like it's real mahogany, and it has some sort of laminate on it. If you look closely inside the F-holes, you can tell that it's not you know, like it says mahogany, but it's like a laminate. It's not mahogany where you can see through the F-hole, that's for sure. Plus the back had some issues with the epoxy or wood filler that they used before they painted it. This is what that looks like right here. And the top looked pretty good other than the chip in the poly. But it's definitely some sort of laminate mahogany. You can tell here from this picture, this is a piece of mahogany that I have from a different project. And this is the wood grain from, you can see through the finish of the paint. You can tell it's the same kind of wood grain. So it does have a mahogany veneer or some sort of laminate or something on top. But all in all, I mean, as far as the wood goes on it, it's pretty good. The neck feels great. I mean, it's all there. So the first upgrade that I always do on any of these less expensive guitars or starter guitars is upgrade the tuners. So there's all sorts of different tuners for different varieties of things. With stuff like this, I try to get what fits, you know, and so I knew that was a 1/4-inch hole, and the tuners that I got for it were locking tuners, but they were pretty much a direct replacement. I had to make sure that the screw that goes into the back of the headstock was in the same place or similar place. Some of them will be at like a straight 90. This one was at a little bit of an angle. So I had to make sure that the tuners that I bought were exactly for that. And they ended up being a direct fit. I even used the screws that came with the guitar rather than open up the bag with the new screws in it. You need a screwdriver, 10mm wrench, and the tuners or machine heads. So you want to carefully loosen the nuts. If you feel like you might slip or anything like that, feel free to put some of that like green painter's tape or something that's not gonna mess up the finish at all, or a rag, or just something to protect it, you know, just in case, because you don't want anything to happen like as far as scratching anything. So I always try to be careful with that, but for this purposes I didn't really worry about it because I've got my special little wrench, and so far so good. To be honest with you, I didn't really need it anyway because they weren't even tight. So yeah. I also want to say I'm not really going over things in depth here. I'm just basically giving you an overview of how I do it and the way I get things into shape. So there's other videos out there that are way better than this and go into way more detail with each of these, but this one for me was just the overall feel of what it's like to, you know, just upgrade an inexpensive guitar and to have that gratification of being able to set it up yourself and do all that. So feel free to look at other videos, or if you want me to go in more in depth in some of these other things, feel free to put in the comments below. I'll gladly do that. I just right now I'm just sort of searching for products and ideas and seeing what happens. So feel free to leave in the comments below if you want any more videos that show a little more depth. So then I flip it over and start to pull out the Phillips screws. They're small screws. So one thing I do is I don't know if you can tell from seeing this video, but I make sure that the end of the screwdriver never leaves the screw, right? So if you're not doing it very often, then you really want to put something to protect the back of the headstock. But you can also hold the screw, guide the screw with your finger, sort of thing, and it won't. Just make sure it don't slip off. So once those are removed, I get the new tuners out and sort of do a little comparison to see. You could also use your calipers and measure everything to the T, just to make sure everything looks right and they're gonna fit good. And like I said, with these, everything looked great other than the fact that the posts on the lockers were a little bit long. But it didn't affect anything, so, it's fine. So why do I use locking tuners rather than regular tuners? And the short answer is because when I play gigs, I only want to bring as little equipment as possible. So I only take one guitar with me. And if I have locking tuners, I carry with me one guitar and 2 sets of strings. So if anything happens and I break a string on stage or whatever, I could literally change the string out in seconds. What happens is when the tuner locks onto the string, as you're tuning it, it tightens it. And it also stretches it. And it's not slipping because, like, if you got non-locking tuners, you got to wrap it like 3 times and then pull on it, yank on it. And what you're doing is you're tightening the metal string around the post first. Then you start stretching it out a little bit. But with lockers, you just lock it down and tune it up and stretch it out a little bit, and it's good to go. So that's really the only reason. So now everything's checked out and getting ready to put the new tuners in. Just making sure that the screw hole lines up and everything. And like I said, I even used the screws that came with the guitar instead of opening the pack of screws. So, everything went without a hitch. It was pretty awesome. Just carefully put this new screw in and snug her down and get ready to flip her over. Now we got her flipped over and we're ready to start installing the nut that goes over the posts. This too is pretty self-explanatory. If you made it this far, then you pretty much know how those work. So I just put them on there, and then I don't crank on it or anything like that. I just give it a nice snug feel, and do my best to be careful not to scratch anything or any of that sort of stuff. So, and that project went without a hitch. I don't like these tuners, though, to be honest with you. They still feel a little bit cheap. And, $30, it's like, well, they stay in tune. Don't get me wrong, that they do, but they just don't feel the same way as like a set of Gotas or whatever. So what I'm thinking about doing is, after I do all this, is upgrading it with the high-end stuff, with the really good stuff, and seeing the difference with that, because it's all about feel, right? Like, you feel good about what you're playing, and when you feel good about what you're playing, you're gonna play good, And so when I know that my tuners are what I want them to be and the guitar is what I want it to be, then I can trust that it's gonna be there for me when I need it. So, like I said, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to shit on them or anything like that. They're just cheaper, but they're definitely way better than what came on it. So if all you can afford is $30 for tuners, I would go with them, and you'll be just fine with it. Now let's talk about the nut. This comes in 3 distinct flavors: bone, tusk, and plastic. So any luthier will tell you that bone is the best nut that you can put on your guitar. It's the hardest material and it resonates better, but the tusk nut is gaining a lot of popularity. I personally like using the tusk nut. First off, cutting a bone nut is the bane of my existence. I have been trying so hard to get it right, man, and it is difficult. You might think, oh, it's only 6 slots. How hard could it be, right? Well, let me tell you, it's a challenge. So the tusk nut is a type of plastic too. It's a synthetic polymer, more along the lines of Teflon type material. It will self-lubricate, so if you cut the slot right, you don't really have to worry about, sometimes people will put graphite in a bone nut. If the slot's cut right, you don't have to do any of that stuff. So, and obviously the plastic nut is the cheapest, would be the cheapest way to go about it, but you can't really do anything with it. So the tools you need for this are a flat surface that you can stick some sandpaper to. feeler gauge, and nut slot files. I'm sure you can get away with not using the nut slot files, but they're awesome, man. Invest in them because it's very precise what you can do with those things. It's really great. I take a flat surface and I put a piece of sandpaper on there, and then I just kind of get it close. I fit it to the size, then I install it, and I restring the guitar and use my nut files and get it to where, start filing, taking it down to where I like it. Here's what it looks like right now. It's not finished. I'm going to take some of the top material off and shine it up a little bit better when I get a little bit more time and stuff. But for right now, it's going to have to do for what it is. Now it's time to check the frets. This by far was the best workmanship on this guitar that I found. The frets were outstanding. There was no sharp edges, and they were level. There was only like a couple that were a little bit, barely just a tad high. So I didn't really have to do much. They were a little bit rough, so they needed a little polish, but other than that, they were good. So basically how I do it is I just take 1000 grit sandpaper and I run it down to 2000. I'll go farther down, like if I have it, but that's all I had, so that's what I had to use. Like if I sometimes use polishing compound with a Dremel, that works. You can go down to like 3000 with like emery cloth type of stuff, that works. This worked great for me for what I needed it for, so that's what I did. As you can see here, each time I do this, you can see how much better it cleans them up and it gets them shinier and shinier each time. So we start with 1000 grit, and then this is what it looks like after the 1500 grit, and this is what it looks like after the 2000 grit. So to set the neck, the action, and the intonation, it's pretty simple. The tools you need are a capo, a screwdriver, a action gauge, a good tuner, and the Allen wrench for the nut. This is pretty straightforward though. I start with the nut. I put the capo on the 1st fret and I hold down at the 12th fret and I check the clearance of the string and see if it's about 10 thousandths. Then I move to the action. I check with the string action gauge and make my adjustment. I believe it's right around 3/30 seconds on the low E and 2/30 seconds on the high E. That's just a roundabout. You can adjust it to your personal taste, but if you try to get it lower, you will probably start buzzing. Then I set the intonation. Just basically put the tuner on, and then I pluck the string open, and then I play it at the 12th fret, and I make my adjustment if it's sharp or flat, and that's how I get my intonation right. So now we're ready for a sound check. I recorded Autumn Leaves on my acoustic guitar that I built. I'll leave a link in the bio for that video. And we will hear how these pickups sound coming straight from the factory. And it'll give us a baseline of what we're looking at for the upgrade. Well, that's part one. It went a little longer than I thought, so we're going to make this a two-part series, and in the next part we're going to talk about the pickups and why I chose what I chose. If you get any value from this, please hit the like button, and if you think it sucked, hit the dislike button. And we will talk to you on the next one. Thanks.